Hi Intermediate, we're going to work on 7.4, which is solving quadratics by factoring. Okay, so let me go over an idea before we start solving. There's something called the zero product rule, which says if A times B equals to 0, so if that is true, then that must mean that either A is 0 or B is 0. Okay? So for something times something to equal to 0, one of them has to be 0. Okay? That's the idea. Alright, now here's an example of this, because you have something times something equals to 0. So that means that either this guy is 0, this whole thing has to equal to 0, or this whole thing has to equal to 0. But one of these have to equal to 0 for their product to be 0. And then if I just go ahead and solve this, so for this times this to equal to 0, x has to either be -5 or x has to be equal to 3. Okay, so this is the basic concept we're going to cover in this section. All right, let's look at some more. So when you do a problem, technically the first step is to see like if you have common factors, if it factors, stuff like that. This one I just did was already partially done. So let me start this by factoring. This is the easier case because the leading coefficient is a 1, so it has to multiply to -35 and add to +2. So that's going to have to be 7 times 5, and for it to add to a +2, the higher number has to be positive. So this multiplies to a negative, this adds to a positive. Alright, and now I'm going to set each of these pieces equal to 0. This guy has to equal to 0, or this guy. Right, and when you solve it, you get that. Alright, now, like I said, I'm just going to go through some examples just to make sure you don't get knocked off by the format of the example. So the problem with this one here is that it has fractions, and you don't want to start this with fractions. So I'm going to get rid of the fractions using the LCD, which is 10. So I'm going to multiply everybody by 10. So this has like some formatting issues that I have to deal with before I can actually solve it. I have to get it formatted correctly so that I can solve it. So that's what I'm working on right now, is the formatting. Alright, so the 10 divided by 10 goes away. Oh, okay, let's see, plus 20. 10 divided by 5 is 2. 2 times 6 is 12G. Now, when you use this zero product rule, you have to make sure that it's equal to 0, otherwise it doesn't apply. This right side has to be 0. So that means now that I have to actually move this guy over. Alright, so now it equals to 0. Now I can factor it. It's got to multiply to +20, add to -12. This is the easier case, so just the 20 is making the -12. Alright, so what are we going to get for that? 2 and 10. And since it has to multiply to a positive and add to a negative, it's double negatives. Alright, so this multiplies to 20. This adds to -12. You set each piece equal to 0. Alright, I sort of ran out of room here, so you're going to add the 2 to the other side. So for the first case, you're going to get G is 2. You're going to add 10 to the other side. The other one is G equals 10. So again, the biggest issue might be when you're solving these is to just make sure the format is correct. This one looks very simple, but you have to get the first step correct. You never want to divide by a D, because right now this is a quadratic, which means it has 2 answers. So you don't want to divide by D and then make it linear. So what you actually want to do is move the D over. You actually want to move the D over so that it stays quadratic. Now this one just has a common factor, so don't forget that some of these problems are just going to have common factors as the steps. And like before, set each of the factors equal to 0. So for this one, we'll get D is 0 and D is 1. All right, now this one looks like somebody was very kind and factored this already for us, so we don't have to do any effort, but that's not accurate, right? Because it's not in the right format. For this to be in the right format, this actually has to be equal to 0. It can't be equal to 9. The only time you can set them, you can't set each of these pieces equal to 9. That doesn't work. So what I'm saying is that we have to break this down because it's in a bad form. I can't actually solve it in this form. So it looks like somebody did a lot of work, but it's actually did work for us. But this one actually has more work for us to do. All right, so we're going to FOIL this out. Combine their middle terms. All right, now I can set it equal to 0. So now I'm going to move the 9 over. Okay. It's got a, so this is the easier case. It's going to multiply to negative 24, add to negative 2. So it's got to be opposite signs. So it's going to be 6 and 4, more negatives. Okay. All right, now set each piece equal to 0. All right, so we're going to get t equals to negative 4 and t equals to 6. All right, let's take an eyeball at this one. All right, so first of all, I need it set equal to 0. So I'm going to move everything over to the left. Now when I do that, I'm going to put it in descending order. All right, now I'm going to notice that it has a common factor of 2g. So I'm going to pull that out. I just like brackets. I'm not using them for any particular reason. All right, now I have to factor what's left in here. All right, so this one has a leading coefficient of 1, so it's the easier case. Okay, let's see here. It's got to multiply to negative 60, but add to 7. So let's see, 60, 1 times 60, 230, 4, 15, 5, 12. Oh, there it is. Okay, 5 and 12. So it's going to have to be, oh no, it's opposite. Oh yeah, we got it. So positive 12 minus 5, because that's to be opposite signs to add to that. Okay, so now we're going to set each piece equal to 0. So 2g equals to 0. G plus 12 equals to 0. G minus 5 equals to 0. Now here I'm just going to divide off the 2. 0 divided by anything is still 0. And we'll get G is negative 12. And G is 5. Just don't forget, you can get ones that have that are the harder kind of factor. Let me just grab one of those since I didn't seem to write one earlier. Let me just grab one. F squared minus 15f plus 14 equals to 0. Alright, so this is a harder one to factor because the leading coefficient isn't a 1. So I told you guys that you could make the table for this. So you're going to do 14 times 4, so 1656. It has to multiply to 56, and it has to add to positive 14. Sorry, it has to add to negative 15. So this times this makes that, and it has to make the middle. Alright, let's see what we get. 3, 4. Do we have it yet? No. 5, 6, 7 times 8. Alright, so this is going to be this one because it has to multiply to a positive but add to a negative. Alright, so remember with this technique you break the middle term and then you do factor by grouping on it. So remember, this isn't actually the answer, this is just like getting you started. So now I'm doing factor by grouping. Got to carry down the sign of the middle term. You got to factor out the negative because the negative times the negative will give you back a positive. Now you got to factor out the common binomial. That's this guy. I'm pulling it out of both terms. I'm pulling this out as a common factor from both terms. Alright, now we can finish solving it. So this guy, it's set equal to 0, so now we can just use that zero product rule. Okay, 7/4 is the first one, and F is 2 is the second part. Okay, gang, so you're going to see all kinds of factoring. You're going to even, I believe, see some just straight up grouping in here. Yep, you're going to see a lot of stuff. So this section isn't too bad. Just remember, you've got to have it set equal to 0. You factor it, and then you solve it out. Okay, catch you. That's it for this section. Bye-bye.